Baka mahilig. Ayan. Magandang hapon. Oops. Magandang hapon. Okay, magandang hapon. Ako po si Trixie Cruz-Angeles. Ito po ang Luminous. At ang pag-uusapan po natin, yung pinaka-umuugong ngayon ay yung tungkol dito sa pangyayari sa International Criminal Court. At mag-umpisa lang po muna tayo dun sa basics at pag-usapan natin how this thing works. Ang parating natatanong sa amin, kumbaga, yung mga frequently asked questions is, paano mag-acquire ng jurisdiction ng ICC over us? Anong mangyayari? I mean, can a warrant of arrest be issued to, let's say, the president dahil siya ang pong pinupuntirya ng kaso na ito? So let's start with the basics at let's look at how the court works. Okay. Dito makikita ninyo the life of the court begins with the Rome Statute. Yung Rome Statute ay isang malaking parang convention yan, maraming tao na nakilahok, maraming bansa ang nakilahok dito sa statute na ito. They got together para maka-cross tayo ng national lines or what we call transnational lines, recognizing transnational crimes. O kinikilala natin na minsan ang mga krimen that occur within the jurisdiction within the jurisdiction of certain countries means na other countries can take cognizance of those crimes kasi nga ang mga krimen na ito ay ganito, genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, or crimes of aggression. Okay? Let's look at what these crimes mean. Genocide is characterized by the specific intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, civic, racial, or religious group. So ang pinupuntirya ng genocide ay groups of people. Okay? So halimbawa, isang buong tribo, isang buong nationality, and so on. Dapat merong commonality itong mga ito. Okay, next. Crimes against humanity. Violations committed as part of a large-scale attack on any civilian population. So baka dito yung pinupuntirya nung sa ICC. Murder, rape, imprisonment, enforced disappearances, enslavement, sexual slavery, torture, apartheid, and deportation. So next, war crimes. Ito yung kapag may armed conflict, may mga krimen that are committed as part of that war or that conflict. Yung fourth ay yung tinatawag na crime of aggression, and the reason I wanted to talk about this slightly lang is it is the use of armed force by a state against the sovereignty, integrity, and independence of another state. Definition of this crime was adopted through amending the Rome Statute in 2010. Okay, bakit? A crime of acts of aggression ay matinding pinagbabawal po sa international law, lalong-lalo na when they involve two different sovereign states or two different jurisdictions. Guys, we're going to deal with your questions later, huh? We're just going to look right now at how the court works, legal processes. The ICC's legal process may function differently from that of our national jurisdiction. So tignan ninyo, ito yung steps, preliminary examination. So ito yung natapos. Yung dating special prosecutor ng ICC, who was Patu Bensouda, bago na ngayon si Khan, conducted a preliminary examination. So base daw dun sa ilang reklamo na ihinain sa kanya, or doon sa ICC, inimbestigahan at lumagap daw siya ng ebidensya tungkol dito at nag-conclude siya na kailangan magbukas ng investigation, and that is the next stage. In order to open an investigation, kailangan magpaalam ang Office of the Special Prosecutor doon sa preliminary sa isang panel ng mga judges, at sila yung magdedetermine kung sufficient na ba yung mga nalagap na ebidensya at saka facts ng special prosecutor, there's sufficient evidence to conduct to open the formal investigation. After the investigation, may pre-trial stage pa yan to determine if there's enough evidence to go on to trial, and then there's trial, appeals, and enforcement of sentence. Pinaka-common question, ano or paano ini-enforce sentence? Ito, the court may exercises jurisdiction in situations of genocide, crimes against humanity, etc. Usually the jurisdiction is acquired first by being signatories to the Rome Statute. So kunwari, signatory tayo dati, if any time during the time na signatory tayo, mayroong na-commit or suspected na na-commit dun sa apat na tinatawag nating crimes na nasa jurisdiction ng International Criminal Court, then pasok tayo dun sa jurisdiction. Maaari din kasi, one is it's committed by a state party or national. So yun, signatory tayo. Or in the territory of a state party or in a state that has accepted the jurisdiction of the court. Okay. At the time, yung mga acts na kiniklaim ni dating special prosecutor were supposedly committed from 2016 to 2019 during the time that we were still under the jurisdiction of the ICC. Nag-withdraw po tayo shortly after the complaint had been filed. The crime, or in a second instance, kapag ni-refer to the ICC prosecutor by the United Nations Security Council pursuant to a resolution under the UN Charter. Ito, in the absence of a referral to an act of aggression, the prosecutor may initiate an investigation on her own or upon a request from a state party. Meron tinatawag na complementarity. Ibig sabihin dito sa complementarity, ang statute na ito or itong agreement na ito is not intended to replace yung mga, how do you call this, processes internal doon sa estado. Halimbawa, dito sa Pilipinas, mayroon tayong rules, mayroon tayong batas tungkol doon sa pag-iimbestiga ng mga krimen, regardless of who commits those crimes. So, pinoprosecute lang dapat ng estado kapag hindi umaandar ang mga sistema na ito. So, or nag-abdicate na ang estado tungkol dun sa mga proseso na ito, nagkakagulo na, there is no way for the state to acquire that to exercise their own powers over that crime. Okay, may cooperation, the ICC doesn't have. Ito yung sinasabi na natin. The ICC does not have its own police force or enforcement body. Thus, it relies on cooperation with countries for worldwide support. Particularly, and this is important, for making arrests, transferring arrested persons, and so on, to the ICC detention center in The Hague, freezing suspects' assets and enforcing sentences. Meaning, yung hindi mismo yung ICC ang magsuserve ng warrant, wala talaga silang police force. Wala rin po silang taong gagawa nun. So they rely on the cooperation of member states. Yung mga countries na signatory dito, kung pumunta, kunwari, ang isang suspect o isang akusado at nahatulan na siya at nandun siya sa isa o sa mga bansa or any of those countries na pumirma dito sa Rome Statute, then maaaring mag-exercise ng jurisdiction yung state na yun being a signatory to the ICC and enforce the warrant in that area. Take note that the ICC is not a United Nations organization. We'll talk about that later. When the situation is not within the court's jurisdiction, the UN Security Council can refer the situation to the ICC, granting it jurisdiction. Okay, dito sa key facts, dahil nasa umpisa pa lang tayo, ang kailangan lang natin tingnan yung early stages. The ICC does not prosecute anybody under 18. Before the prosecutor can investigate, she must conduct a preliminary examination, considering such matters such as, not limited to, sufficient evidence, jurisdiction, gravity, complementarity, and the interests of justice. Meron pang isa dapat na should be included here is admissibility. When investigating, the prosecutor must collect and disclose both incriminating and exonerating evidence. Okay? The defendant is considered innocent until proven guilty. Okay. So do you see now how the court works? Let's look at your questions first. Okay. And wait, nasan tayo? All right, let's look at your questions. Sabi ni Ma'am Sinaida Walton, I'm glad you're discussing this. It's worrying kasi it affects us all, particularly the President. Remember that the ICC prosecutor, ngayon pa lang po siya nag-request to open an investigation. So, ibig sabihin, dun sa original niya na what she did was, she did not yet open, kumbaga, she opened an examination, meaning siya pa lang ang nag-conduct ng investigation, naglagap ng ebidensya. So the court hasn't come into play here yet. It's only the Office of the Special Prosecutor. At ginawa niya ito just immediately before she retired. In other words, nilabas niya yung report bago siya natapos ng term. So bago na po ang Special Prosecutor ngayon. So dito, yung ICC, of course, works with continuity. Yung pagka-ascend ng bagong prosecutor, is he supposed to take over whatever cases have been recommended or referred. This does not stop the new special prosecutor from reviewing whatever is already presented, at saka pwede niyang either ipagtanggol o withdraw pa uli yung request for investigation. Okay. Let me check. Tinatanong ni Mark Aaron Soliva, ano po yung punishment na ibibigay sa mga guilty with the punishment from the law of the country kung saan po nanggaling? Hindi po. It will be detention pa rin, the same. But not in the country where the arrest warrant has been served. Okay. Thank you for the clear explanation, lalo na wala silang kakayahan mag-aresto. Yes, but that does not mean it's not possible to arrest, ha? Huwag po kayong magkakamali to think na hindi possible ang arrest, because if this person ever goes to another country and that country is a signatory and there is an outstanding warrant, maaari siyang i-aresto doon sa bansa na signatory to the ICC. Okay? Sila pwedeng pumasok dito. In other words, no foreign country or agents of a foreign country can come to the Philippines to execute the warrant of arrest. Bawal po yan. So, only if the accused or the person who has been convicted dito sa ICC goes to another country, pwede, yung country na yun ay signatory, doon pwede siyang servan ng arrest warrant. Kahit transient siya. So, kunwari, he's going someplace, may stop over, let's say he's going to, example lang, ang isang akusado papunta sa Estados Unidos, who is not a signatory to the Rome Statute, pero ang stopover niya ay Japan, and Japan is a signatory to the Rome Statute, then maaari pong servan siya ng warrant doon. Okay, that's if Japan is a signatory. I have to double check that. Okay. Ano daw yung weight nung pag-atras ni Attorney Sabio, though he passed away already? Okay, by the time nung Attorney Sabio was the first complainant. There are two complaints ang pagkaintindi ko dito. Yung pangalawang complaint ay final ni dating Senador Trillanes at ni Gary Alejano. I'm not sure if he was ever a congressman. No. Si Gary Alejano and Trillanes filed a complaint also pursuant to the same allegations that were contained dito sa kay Sabio. So, si Sabio, winidraw niya yung kanya, pero tumuloy pa rin dahil at the time na winidraw ni Sabio, I understand na binuksan na ni Fatu Bensouda yung examination into the war on drugs. Okay. Ito. Sabi ni Antonio SC30, sabi ng mga wokes or dilaw, bakit daw iniwasan ni PRRD ang investigation kung wala naman daw siyang kasalanan? It's no longer an issue. Hindi ito katulad ng ng local na mga laws na wala kang choice kundi to submit to the jurisdiction of the courts by once a warrant is issued to you or a subpoena is issued to you, wala kang choice. Dito, we can refuse to recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC on the matter itself. Bakit? Kasi merong tinatawag na complementarity dito sa Rome Statute. Ang purpose ng complementarity is it ensures na walang jurisdiction yung ICC dun sa matters that are internal to a state at merong allegation tungkol dun sa internal matters na yun at yung estado mismo ay nagko-conduct ng investigation or is dealing with it. So last year, I understand na nag-open na nga ng investigasyon ang DOJ dito sa mga extrajudicial hindi extrajudicial killings kasi may political implication yon. Dun sa mga namamatay in the course of arrests dito sa war on drugs and so on. Okay. Double check ko lang yung ating internet. Okay. Yan, medyo mabagal kasi dun sa isang natin. Sa isang... Alright. Alright, so continue tayo. So, in the case of dito, hindi po umiiwas si PRRD because in any case, in fact, in any local case, ang nangyayari dito is that the an accused can or a suspect can always its first course of action kapag ikaw ay kinakasuhan ng criminal case is to look kung may jurisdiction yon doon sa tao or doon sa crime. So those two things, jurisdiction over the person at saka jurisdiction over the crime itself. So dito in international cases particularly hindi pa hindi pa nagkakaroon ng jurisdiction. Kumbaga, this is still just the opening of an investigation, then pwede tayong mag-question everything. Ganyan talaga kapag ikaw ang subject of an investigation or later on a suspect or an accused. Okay? You can question everything. Jurisdiction over the person, jurisdiction by the court itself. Yeah. Okay, umayos na uli yung signal. Okay. Ito, sabi ni Felix Alyosada, wala naman daw pong concrete evidence, puro sabi-sabi lang, pero pinupolitika lang ng opposition. Well, the determination of how much evidence is will let the case fly. In other words, magbubukas ng investigation will be determined by the panel of judges. Pero I think that we agree, at least in my own personal opinion, I agree with the assessment ni Secretary Harry Roque that the basis of the examination, yung conclusion ni Madam Bensuda, was based largely on hearsay. So, di ba, medyo weird yun. Dito, makikita natin, this is the Rome Statute itself. Okay? So, dito sa Article 15, makikita nyo, the prosecutor may initiate investigations on the basis of information on crimes within the jurisdiction of the court. And ang pagbukas or dun sa conclusion ng kanyang examination, ginamit niya yung Article 15, Section 3. If the prosecutor concludes there is reasonable basis to proceed with an investigation, he shall submit to the pre-trial chamber a request for authorization of an investigation, okay? Together with any supporting material collected. Victims may make presentations to the pre-trial chamber in accordance with the rules of procedure and evidence. So ito yung ginamit na basis ni Madam Bensuda. She concluded that there is reasonable basis to proceed with an investigation. So ngayon what she's doing is she's asking the pre-trial chamber for authorization to open an investigation. Who is going to conduct that investigation? Sila din po. Okay. Dito, ang kapansin-pansin doon sa report ni Madam Bensuda ay meron siyang hindi siya nag-include ng issues of admissibility. required po kasi na i-indicate dun sa kanyang report mismo na dapat may admissibility. Having regard to paragraph 10, the court shall determine that the case is inadmissible if it's being investigated or prosecuted by a state which has jurisdiction over it, unless the state is unwilling or unable genuinely to carry out investigation or prosecution. Ibig sabihin, kailangan ni-report ni Madam Bensuda na whether or not yung material yung pag-investigate ng DOJ doon sa mga namamatay in the war on drugs. She did not include that, and that is material. So ang sinasabi ni Spox Harry Roque, may kakulangan yung report ni Madam Bensuda. So hindi natin pa kine-question yung whether there's sufficient evidence or not. What we're questioning right now is first the jurisdiction of the ICC, considering nga na tayo mismo nag-iimbestiga ng mga reklamo tungkol dun sa mga namatay in the war on drugs. At may mga recommendations na ang DOJ doon sa PNP tungkol doon sa pagtatanggal at saka pag-file ng mga kaso laban doon sa mga pulis na may kinalaman or kasangkot doon sa mga pagpapatay ng mga suspect sa war on drugs. Sabi ni James Bong, will it prosper kahit tumiwalag tayo sa ICC? What are the chances po na mababaliwala lahat ng arguments nila? I don't deal with chances. Like any officer of the court or any person who has to deal with court matters, we don't give odds. Kasi pag tinanong nyo what are the chances, ibig sabihin, if you were a betting guy, which side would you be on? That's the meaning of your question. What are the chances? So we don't deal with that. First of all, we refuse to recognize the jurisdiction of the court kasi nga walang admissibility dito. Kailangan diniscuss ni Ms. Bensuda, ni Madam Bensuda, whether or not the state was already conducting an investigation into the crime that was alleged dito. At dito, ang ina-alleged na crime ay yung pagpapatay ng mga tao in the course of the war on drugs. Okay, ito si Carson. Fatu Bensouda's country, the Gambia, is 174th worst country. Why do you think she singles out the Philippines? She also gave a statement at the day of her retirement. Isn't it possible someone from here bribed her? Seems suspicious. What's her history with the Philippines? I don't deal with yung mga ganito na haka-haka because I don't have any evidence to make a evaluation on whether or not she had been bribed and all of that. These are allegations that are very serious and we don't actually consider them unless meron tayong serious na evidence pertaining to that. Sabi ni Ma'am Mir na malapit na kasi eleksyon, hirap banggain si Duterte na lahat ng panira ginagawa ng anti-Duterte, effect talaga. Okay, now remember what we were talking about, that there are two glaring deficiencies doon sa sinumiti ni Madam. In addition to our own questions about the evidence that she is supposedly relying on. So admissibility at complementarity. So tingnan natin yung complementarity ha. The Rome Statute. Notify all the states. Yan. So admissibility. Oops, sandali yung complementarity hinahanap ko eh. Sandali, we'll get back to that. However, ang sinasabi natin dito, before the case should be considered admissible into the pre-trials, we can open an investigation, kailangan maliwanag kung meron nga ba dito na tinatawag natin na meron ba yung investigation mismo if the state itself had already addressed the issue. Kasi yan ang tinatawag natin ng exercise ng sovereignty. So, di ba sinabi natin at the start na a state, the ICC only applies complementarily to the sovereignty or to the state's jurisdiction over crimes that are committed within its own territory. Kahit yung crimes na yon ay pasok dun sa Rome Statute. So, dito, they're talking about targeting a specific population at ito ay pinapatay. So either genocide or crimes against humanity. Most likely crimes against humanity yung allegation dito. At yung crimes na yon ay yung pagpapatay pursuant to a state policy dun sa mga suspects in the war on drugs. Okay? Pero yun na nga, the report does not deal with the conclusions and the actions that are currently being undertaken by the PNP and the DOJ. Israel also rejected the ICC's probe, saying they are not a member and their courts are capable to investigate their soldiers. Same like the Philippines. They are also saying the ICC's probe is anti-Semitic. Sabi ni Rain, kung tatakbo si Chela Senator again, sabi ko kay Kamentong sa FB nakahanda ng inidolo. To be honest, all of these left idiots like Bensuda is quiet in their own messes. Okay. Medyo malayo-layo na yan dun sa sa tinatalakay natin. Sabi ni Wutar Prish, halata na yung kabilang parlor, US Senator proclamation together with the usual local opposition noise, all of which failed. Okay, today, tinilakay din natin yung, dun sa Karambola, tinalakay din natin yung mga possible goings on. Bakit? Dito sa pag-open ng like we said, maaga pa itong stage na ito. Malayo pa ito sa trial. Wala pa nga ito dun sa preliminary stage because, di ba, as we said, nakikita natin, add this to the stream. Ayan, nakikita nyo. Bakit iba yung, ayan. Example of investigation in case from start to finish. Oops, wala. Shares and we'll put back the we'll put back the room statute. Sorry, with how the court works. Yun. Ito yung nakikita natin, yung investigation and case from start to finish. Preliminary examination, yun po pa lang yung natapos. Tapos, investigation, yun ang hinihingi ng, ng special prosecutor. So, and even if in the investigation of the special prosecutor ay para sa kanya pasado na into the pre-trial stage, kailangan pa rin isumite ng special prosecutor yung evidence at yung evidence na to should be sufficient for this to go to pre-trial stage. Right now, the request is to open an investigation base dun sa preliminary examination ni Madam Fatou Bensouda. Okay, so, remember, ang natapos pa lang is the preliminary examination and now we're going to, ang ni-request niya is to open an investigation. Okay. Ito, sabi ni Ma'am Pinay, didn't the ICC listen to Attorney Sabio's statements when he retracted his allegations and admitted he was failed to file a case against PRRD at the same time? Well, she's supposed to include that doon sa kanyang examination. But apparently, if at any rate, even if she didn't consider that, like I said, it will still go into investigation and to pre-trial stage where the matter of the withdrawal of the complaint can be discussed. If the investigation pushes through and we will not cooperate, pwede ba tayo ma-cite in contempt? Hindi po. Okay? We can refuse to cooperate kasi nga, isang malaking pagkukulang ay yung pagkakikilala na, by the way, ni-recognize ng UN. Kinilala yung ating sovereignty dito and to allow us, or we should be assisted according to the UN. And remember, the UN and the ICC are two separate bodies. So, dun sa UN side naman, ang sinasabi ng UN is that, the Philippines should actually be assisted. Hindi dapat tayo gulo sa kanilang jurisdiction, and the Philippines should be allowed to investigate the deaths on their own and for the state to not just take cognizance of them, but to exercise its jurisdiction and investigate and punish, hold for trial, and then if necessary, punish those who are involved in the in killings in the war on drugs. Alam niyo kung bakit? Okay, mahalaga itong part na ito. The of course, sovereignty is always number one, di ba? So, kinikilala ng UN na you can only go into, or how do you call this, defeat the sovereignty of a country under two circumstances. One is the country itself gives up a certain aspect of that sovereignty. So that's what happens when we are signatories to a treaty o kaya pumirma tayo sa isang convention, pumapayag tayo na sumailalim doon sa jurisdiction. Like say, before, under the ICC, pumayag tayo kasi signatory tayo. So once we withdrew from that, then wala nang jurisdiction yung ICC over us. Although the ICC in the Rome Statute can claim that they can investigate kahit hindi state parties to the convention. When the crime is of such a magnitude na wala naman tayong choice, we cannot all look the other way. I don't think that in this instance, umaabot dun sa point na yun. Diba? Ito. Sabi ni PJ Texon, it has been and always United States and oligarchs, ganyan style ng US to control a country and do whatever they want. Well, diniscuss nga natin sa Karambola, the possibilities, we're not saying this is a fact, the possibility that there are some international relations issues going on. Halimbawa, there is a theory that says that the US might be using this purposes of pressuring the Philippines to reinstate the VFA. That is one theory. Okay. Ito, sabi ni Elmer Bernardino, Fatu did the farewell move to favor partisan politics than truth because she has the notion that anything after that day, since it is her final, no longer has any backlash on her. Right now, I think that's pretty speculative. In the meantime, pasalamat muna ako kay Roel Costello at saka kay Jason Beslick. Sabi ni Jason, I thought the Philippines was never been legally inducted as part of the ICC. If that's true, why even bother with this investigation scare? Like I said, sometimes the ICC takes cognizance of crimes that are committed even in territories of states that are not parties. Sometimes it's rare, but they do that. Okay. Sabi ni Eric Robert Santos, what's the difference between the war on drugs ng Philippines and Mexico? Bakit hindi pinupuna ng ICC ang drug war sa Mexico? Well, like I said, the discretion to open an examination or an investigation, of course, to open an examination lies solely within the prosecutor based on the following. One, that they can take cognizance of a complaint, or they can take cognizance if it is a state party, meaning yung bansa ang lumapit sa ICC, paki-imbestigahan nga ito. Or may recommendation ng United Nations Security Council. So I think that in this case, it's simply the exercise of the discretion of the Office of the Special Prosecutor. Yes, matagal na natin pinaghihinalaan yung Office of the Special Prosecutor. Pero ayoko pa kasi munang haluan yung discussion natin ng mga haka-haka natin, particularly if it is not supported by evidence. In case nothing happens with this case right now for a year and the president finishes his term, the president is still subject to investigation and arrest. Does this case not prescribe? Can it never prescribe? Once the you know the rule, diba? Jurisdiction once acquired is not lost. So once it has been acquired and then the process has begun, then normally meron na nga jurisdiction. Right now kasi tayo, the Philippines does not recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC because the ICC is only complementary to the state action itself. So tayo, dahil na-investigahan na natin yung war on drugs, hindi dapat nag-a-acquire ng jurisdiction ang ICC over the president. Yun na nga yung problema dun sa report ni Madam Fatou Bensouda, hindi po niya in-include doon sa kanyang report yung complementarity at saka admissibility. Tila malayo pa yan sa bituka ni PRRD, baka tapos na ang term ni Sara, di pa tapos ang kasong yan. Sakaling aprubahan ng successor ni Fatu, request niya at pumasok sa proper investigation, kailangan nila physical evidence mula sa Pilipinas. Ang Amerika, binawi lahat ng mga visas ng ICC prosecution nung gusto nilang imbestigahan ng Afghanistan. By the way, medyo hindi na po current yung balita ninyo, Sir Boy, kasi very recently, ni-reinstate na po, hindi na po persona non grata, ni-reverse na po ni President Biden yung policy ni President Trump vis-a-vis the ICC and the Office of the Special Prosecutor. This happened last April. Sabi ni Chair, Bobby Tiglao states that the ICC's source of basis of investigating Duterte is none other than Rappler. Umabot na sa sukdulan na talagang kasamaan na tinaguri ang truth tellers. On this one, yes, I agree with Sir Bobby Tiglao that part of the evidence na nilagap supposedly ng Office of the Special Prosecutor ay yung sinasabi na statistics ng Rappler, which says that there are about 30,000 deaths daw in the war on drugs. Of course, very recently, hindi na po ginagamit yung number na yon. Gayon pa man, it's already there and they haven't taken down any of their, allegedly, in the numbers that they are citing. So, ang sinasabi dun sa report ni Madam Bensouda is 12,000 to 30,000 ang possible deaths dito sa war on drugs. Now, the number actually is not relevant. What is more relevant? Of course, medyo it makes it more scary, di ba? Pagka sinabi mo 30,000, parang wow, it's like an entire generation of people. Anyway, ang sinasabi natin dito is, we have been investigating. The DOJ opened an investigation. It made recommendations to the PNP for the removal of certain PNP personnel and for the filing of criminal cases against many of them. So, hindi pa nga tapos yung mga kaso na yun dahil very recently lang pumasok yung sa DOJ. And so, this is something that we must keep hammering on. Kulang po yung report ni Madam Bensouda because deal with whether or not the Philippines is taking cognizance of these deaths and investigating it on its own because it has not only primary jurisdiction but this is an exercise of its sovereignty. Sabi ni Ma'am Arlene, can ICC and Dutch government know investigate Joma Sison, who is the founder of the CPP-NPA? We all know that the group is categorized as terrorists. How do you call this? Not exactly categorized, designated po locally. Medyo malayo na po to sa ating jurisdiction, sa ating usapan. Pero yes, can the ICC investigate Joma Sison? Yes, if we file a case. Can the Dutch government investigate Joma? Yes, in fact, they did. There was a case filed, but I understand the case has been dismissed. I need to double check that. What will be the effects kung di tayo mag-cooperate? At what will be the worst action na pwedeng gawin ng ICC legally in case of non-cooperation ng ating gobyerno? Well, in the first place, a lot of the evidence will be coming from here. So, kung hindi magko-cooperate ang ating gobyerno, paano sila lalagap ng ebidensya laban din dito sa sa presidente whom they are making liable for the war on drugs? Tito Rossi says, the ICC is a giant without arms and legs. It has no police power. Why need to worry? Like I said, the ICC doesn't have to be acting on its own. It doesn't need the police force kasi nga this is a convention, meaning it's a large treaty with many signatories. So dun sa mga countries that are signatories here, kung sakasakali it ever reaches the point that a warrant of arrest is to be issued for the accused, then any country in which the accused can find himself or be there, a country that is a signatory to the ICC, they can execute that warrant. What they cannot do is violate our sovereignty by serving the warrant here because we do not recognize their power over us, particularly in the absence of the complementarity, in the absence of the recognition by Fatu Bensouda of the complementarity of the jurisdiction of the ICC. Sabi ni Ellie, last 2020, nag-impose po ng sanction ng US kay Bensouda. But na-lift na yon last April. Can our government do the same? Yes, of course, we can do that. Sabi ni Ma'am Christy, di ba convicted na si Maria Ressa sa libel case niya? Hindi ba mawalan ng credibility ang Rappler? I think you put too much weight on the issues of credibility in which is also the basis dito sa case natin. Okay, let's talk about credibility and their admissibility in court. Is credibility evidence? No. It only affects the testimony of a witness in the absence of any evidence supporting that witness's statement. So, kunwari, eyewitness ako to a crime. Can somebody say, ikaw, sinungaling naman yung taong yun. Pero kung may testimony, actually, supports all of the other evidence that had been presented and there are other witnesses to the event, then that that credibility is no longer going to be an issue for the court. Besides, in the absence, usually pagka what we call the statement is assertive, meaning meron akong kinlaim. Credibility is not a strong way to take down the testimony of a witness. You can only claim credibility, but you're going to need to prove pa rin that the person, in the absence of other evidence, is telling a lie. Okay? So, itong mga credibility na yan, a lot of the times, it works only pag we're heckling each other online, di ba? Sasabihin na, ikaw, this is your past, but does it really change what the person is asserting? So, di ba, I always warn you about things like ad hominem statements. So for instance, A and B are in a debate. And then si B natatalo na, sasabihin niya kay A, ikaw A, nakasuhan ka na eh. In fact, nakulong ka for 6 months. Pero kung tama pa rin yung argument ni A, then kahit sabihin mo pang hindi siya credible, kahit sabihin mo pa siyang pangit or anything like that, it doesn't change the weight of the statement. Okay, so don't put too much how do you call this? Too much emphasis on things like credibility. It works for us. And it works for us in cases of elections and things like that. We can refuse to elect people that we think are not credible. But when it comes to making assertions, if there is evidence to support that, then don't consider the credibility issue. Consider whether or not there is actual evidence to support the statement that this person made. Now, this person, let's say, itong si Rappler, o kung ano-anong pinagsasabi, may 12,000, may 30,000. Ang kailangan lang natin sabihin sa kanila, o sige, i-enumerate ninyo yung mga cases kasi you're talking about people who are dead. So there is almost always evidence of that death. So mag-produce po kayo ng mga death certificates at yung mga circumstances ng pagkamatay ng 30,000 na yon. Buti sana kung ito ay lahat nangyari all at the same time. So it was a mass murder of like tens of thousands of people. Madali yung patunayan. Pero ang sinasabi nila dito, 12 to 30,000 people po ang napatay in separate incidents. And those incidents have to be supported by evidence. Di ba? Hindi enapin kunwari, oo, nakita ko na binaril ng pulis ito sa ulo, ganyan-ganyan. O sige, but you have no body. You don't know who the victim is. You don't know the circumstances of the crime and so on. So remember that all of those 30,000 deaths need to be proven with evidence. And that evidence should be sufficient as in, for instance, beyond to prove that the crime has been committed beyond reasonable doubt. Now, they don't have to prove all the 30,000 or even the 12,000, just enough to prove that there was a state policy regarding killings and there's a sufficient body of evidence to indicate that there are many who were killed in the pursuit of this state policy. E dun pa lang sa pagpapatunay ng state policy, meron na silang problema kasi inimbestigahan nga natin yung mga namatay in the war on drugs. This is strong evidence that there is no policy to kill people in the course of the war on drugs. Kahit yung mga statement ni Pangulo na sinasabing na, sige patayin ninyo kapag pumalag, which is actually part of the standard operating procedure. Kapag unruly or very dangerous ang suspect, then you can use force. And you can use force if that person presents himself as a danger to the people around him or a danger to the arresting officers. So yung mga ganong instances, they justify the acts of violence that are committed in the course of the arrest. Eugene Culadilla says, totoo po ba nanggaling ang investigasyon ng ICC ay mula sa mainstream media? Dalawa sila ng ABS-CBN at Rappler. Considered po ba yon? At sa in ordinary criminal cases, ang mga ang ebidensya ng mga newspaper reports ay hindi po normally admissible kasi hindi po siya first-hand account. Kaya tayo naglalagay ng witness doon sa witness stand kasi yung taong yon ay saksi. Ibig sabihin, nakita niya yung pangyayari at alam niya yung pangyayari na yon ay totoo dahil nakita nga ng sarili niyang mata. Okay? In this case, ang ginagamit po ni Madam Bensuda ay yung mga news reports pertaining to these alleged deaths. Now, whether or not the investigation will consider them, it's possible na kinoconsider lang po yung mga news reports na yon to point us into the direction as to where the investigation will begin or where the investigation should be directed. Hindi natin sinasabi na yung news reports na yon ay necessarily going to be used to prove guilt or innocence, pero it is possible na sinusumiti siya to point the investigators in certain directions. Sabi ni Romel, sa saligang batas nga natin, pwede bang maging basehan ang ebidensya na galing sa mainstream media? Yan nga po yung sinasabi ko. This is not yet a trial. Doon sa trial sa atin, hindi siya admissible. Pero kapag nasa investigasyon pa lang, let's say ng NBI or ng PNP, maaari nilang gamitin yung news report na yon para mag-umpisa ng investigasyon. O ano yung investigasyon dito? Pupunta yung police dun sa reporter, tatanungin niya sa reporter, sino ba yung witness na yan? At yun ang i-question ngayon ng NBI or ng PNP. Hindi naman yata sinasabi that this evidence is being submitted to prove the guilt or innocence, but merely to indicate the direction of where the investigation is going to go. Okay? Wag masyadong anuhin yung pagpatungo tungkol dun sa evidence. Yes, if that evidence is submitted to prove the guilt or innocence of the president, then definitely hindi yan magiging admissible at trial. Pero remember, hindi pa po trial, investigation pa lang ang patutunguhan nito. Yun pa lang po ang nire-request ni Madam Bensuda. Sabi ni Ma'am Rain, I don't think Trillanes as a voice to this ICC case. Kilala naman natin sino ang may asawang taga-ICC, kaya alam nating may luto from within sa International Kangaroo Court. Sino may asawang taga-ICC? Okay. So remember that the prosecutor is simply asking to open a full investigation. So to support that full investigation, ang kiniklaim niya are these news reports. Okay? These news reports cannot be admissible as evidence to the guilt or innocence of a person because these are not direct testimonies. But the investigation can look into these news reports. Okay. Sabi ni Neil Verve, Aryan, preliminary investigation pa lang po. Yun na nga yung sinasabi natin. Diba? Actually, it's not it's investigation. So, tapos na po yung preliminary examination. Ms. Bensuda had requested the opening of an investigation. So, this is not yet a trial. It is not yet even pre-trial. Okay. Sabi ni Cheryl, we thank you for your super chat. Thank you for keeping us well informed and for your efforts at helping create a new brand of educated citizens. Mabuhay po kayo. Yun nga ang problema, yung media hanggang panira lang, walang makita ang ebidensya talaga sa mga pahayagan at periodiko din tulad ng Rappler. Well, yun na nga, nevertheless, pahamak pa rin, di ba? So we must also be discerning when it comes to our information. Kaya nga, ilang beses natin sinasabi na these issues called fake news and all that, these are issues that are designed to protect the current journalists. Kumbaga, they want to be able to determine kung sino ang nagsasabi ng totoo, and by branding other people as fake news, they're branding themselves as the true news. Sila lang ang pwede. So I think we have to start overlooking itong mga issues ng fake news because it is also political in nature. Okay, that is my opinion. Mamaya, ifa-fact check na naman tayo. Okay, to whoever is going to report this again, fact checking into an opinion is going to lead you into a lot of trouble. Possibly lead you into a lot of trouble. Okay, McFern says, hindi po talaga paniniwalaan ng Rappler at ABS-CBN dahil ang pinagbabasihan lang nila ay kwentong walang pinag-iba po yan. Sa chismis, pinaniniwalaan na agad ng isang chismosa tulad ng mga taga-ICC. Yes, I understand naman yung mga feelings ninyo. Nevertheless, we don't believe them. We don't believe Rappler. We don't believe ABS-CBN or at least there's a popular opinion that says that these news reports coming from ABS-CBN and Rappler are not to be believed or are not credible because maraming instances that we have caught them editorializing, kumbaga hindi sila talaga objective, meron talaga silang kinikilingan and all that. Nevertheless, they can create a lot of trouble for us kasi nga itong ginawang basis sa request to open an investigation. Wala pa namang boto ang iba pang mga prosecutor sa ICC, kaya relax muna ang kabila, wag muna mag-celebrate. Actually, I'm not sure about what you're saying na boto ng ibang prosecutor sa ICC. The Office of the Special Prosecutor makes the request to the pre-trial, to the panel of judges to open an investigation. So, wala nga muna silang isa-celebrate kasi nga, it's the panel that will determine whether or not an investigation is to be opened. Na-late daw si Naila. Okay. Ito, tinatanong ni Ma'am Bell, bakit ang Black Lives Matter hindi nila ma-investigate? Well, I don't think anybody has referred it to the Office of the Special Prosecutor, or the UN Security Council has not made a request or has not made a recommendation for investigation. Diba sabi natin dalawa. So pwedeng yung Office of the Special Prosecutor, sila yung mag-initiate motu proprio if it involves any of those 4 crimes. Ang tanong is, papasok ba yan dun sa 4 na crimes? Genocide, crimes against humanity, crimes of aggression, and forgot what was the other one. Sorry. Genocide, crimes, and war crimes. So, genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. So, hindi pa rin natin alam saan po papasok dito sa crimes that fall into the jurisdiction of the ICC. Kung wala po yan dun sa 4, then hindi talaga iimbestigahan yan ng Office of the Special Prosecutor. Sabi ni Ma'am Nitz na late din daw siya. Pag di nga nila napatunayan yung mga akusasyon, libel pa isasampa sa kanila ng administrasyon as a backfire. Well, yeah, they can do that. Kasi true na di naman kinikilala ang warrant of arrest ng ICC sa ibang bansa at wala naman daw silang jurisdiction. Paulit-ulit po yung tanong na ito, ha? Ulitin ko po. The states that are signatory to the Rome Statute can serve the warrant of arrest. So itong mga hindi kinikilala and all that, by signing the Rome Statute, kinilala nyo na yung validity of warrants of arrest issued by the ICC. So wag naman po tayong fake news. We're going to deal with this objectively. Hindi pwede yung umaasa tayo sa mga ganyang di naman kinikilala. It will still depend on the country. Now the country, in the exercise of its sovereignty, can, for instance, meron na silang notice, meron na silang the person is within their jurisdiction. In other words, for example, sa country C, pumunta doon yung akusado. Si country C ay signatory doon sa ICC. meron silang notice, pwede silang mag-serve ng warrant dun sa tao na yon. They can still also determine how they're going to comply with this obligation, or if they're going to do that. Pwede naman nilang sabihin kay akusado, wag ka na dito, umalis ka na dito because otherwise we will serve a warrant of arrest. So yung how they're going to serve it, how they're going to deal with their own obligation or their own power to serve that warrant is something to be determined by the state. Okay? So wag natin, we cannot say blanket na hindi yan kinikilala ng ibang mga estado. It will still depend on the state how they're going to exercise that, or if they're going to exercise it at all. But it can be exercised. So kung si akusado nasa country na signatory dun sa ICC at nag-decide yung country na yan, aarestuhin ka namin pursuant to the Rome Statute, they can do that. Okay, so fallacies. The ICC doesn't need the police force because they can rely on the signatories. However, those signatories can determine how they're going to exercise that power or to enforce or to serve the warrant of arrest. Okay? Wag fake news. Sabi ni Marlon Dudy, he has to face the investigation. What do you mean by that? He has to face the investigation kaysa malagay yung pinasa sanctions. Paano tayo masa-sanction? The ICC cannot issue a sanction like an economic embargo against the Philippines. Diba? Anong sanctions yan? Hindi. The ICC cannot act against a state party kung ang individual ang siyang nahatulan. So hindi natin obligasyon halimbawa isuko ang isang akusado, lalong-lalo na hindi na po tayo signatory to the convention. Okay? Sabi ni Robert Arevalo, applicable lang yung ICC sa maraming African countries, hindi effective ang judiciary nila dahil matagal na silang tribo-tribo ang gawin ng buhay nila. Well, I wouldn't put it all that way. Hindi yan rule na applicable yan sa maraming countries. Ang problema nga ng ibang mga African countries ay napag-iinitan sila. So, wala pong, ang mga tribo-tribo actually have personality under international law. So he cannot dismiss yung mga tribo-tribo lang as a lesser form of government or a lesser form of personality of a group of people, di ba? Huwag po tayong ganyan. Hindi rin by rule applicable lang. In other words, what happens is that in the history dito ng ICC ay nauna sila. Sila po yung napag-iinitan kasi nga they might be weaker in asserting themselves against the ICC. Di ba ang ICC para lang sa mga bansa na lawless na? No po. Para sa mga bansa na signatory to the convention, and sometimes nga the ICC tries to supposedly can take cognizance of crimes that occur in non-member states. Pero I don't know how they're going to do that. Or pag ang justice system is not functioning well, hindi ba ito insulto sa Supreme Court natin? Una-una, hindi pa po umaabot sa ating Korte Suprema. Justice system is not functioning well, but it amounts to an abdication. So, sino magsasabi na hindi natin kayang imbestigahan yan? Tayo muna. Can a third country or can the ICC determine na inabandona o ang Pilipinas ay hindi uma-action dito? Not without difficulty. Kasi kailangan pa nilang patunayan na yun na nga. Base dun sa complementarity rule ng Rome Statute, ay hindi pasok ang Pilipinas doon dahil nagre-refuse tayo to take cognizance of these crimes. Di po ba magkaroon ng crisis among the signatories pag nag-serve sila ng warrant of arrest from the ICC sa taong very popular sa isang bansa? What do you mean crisis? You mean a diplomatic issue between let's say our country and the country that will serve a warrant of arrest? Well, yeah, of course, but that's their call. Diba? May mga tralala kasing nagsumbong dun sa ICC at di pa katotohanan ng mga sinumbong. Well, yeah. But again, kung wala ngang katotohanan, then there's never going to be any evidence to that. Ano ba ang mga kailangan nilang patunayan? na ang presidente ay nag-utos na pumatay ang police force natin pursuant to a policy. Okay? State-sponsored killing nga eh. The president acting as the head of state was the one who ordered it. So, dahil ito ay crimes against humanity, yung pagpapatay, indiscriminate killing ng mga suspects dito sa drug war, yun ang kailangan patunayan, that there's indiscriminate killing, that the targets were the suspects in the war on drugs, and that the president had ordered their killing. So mabigat po na punteriya yon ha, hindi ganun kadali magpatunay na itong tao, the president never ordered the killings, because if you will look very carefully at his remarks, hindi na sinabing patayin nyo, contextual yan. Sinabi niya pag pumalag, patayin niyo kapag they present themselves as a danger to the people around them or to the police force or to the person, the officer who is conducting the arrest, allowed po yung use of force. And that is recognized in most countries. So, ako, I'm not even worried. Even if this goes to trial, there's no way that this can be proven unless the trial is a sham. But there's, in addition to which, we have been prosecuting the police. In fact, di ba, yung sa pagkamatay ni Kian, yung dalawang police yun are already serving their sentence. So, nagbukas din ng investigasyon ng DOJ at maliwanag na may mga police na nirekomenda, not just for trial, but also for removal from the police force. Kung sakaling di talaga makapasok ang ICC prosecutor sa Pinas dahil di natin sila na-recognize, maaari ba silang humingi ng tulong sa UN? Hindi po. They cannot do that because the UN is a separate body. Naaalala ninyo na nag-issue nga ng resolution ng UN, kinikilala nila na meron ng problema dito sa war on drugs, but the Philippines should be assisted in making its investigations for the protection of human rights. Hindi po sila pumayag, ang UN na pasukin tayo ng mga representante ng United Nations, like what they're going to be doing in what I understand they want to do with Myanmar, with Israel, to investigate and to come here regardless of the defeating the sovereignty of the nation to take cognizance of their own actions. Sabi ni Jason, talagang fake news lang yan. Ang totoong news daw ay ABS. Okay. Sabi ni April Alice, mga biased na media ang nagsumbong sa ICC, pinahahalagahan nila yung namatay sa war on drugs kaysa sa mga biktima ng mga adik. Hindi po ba katulad lang po yung investigasyon ng ICC sa arbitration na parehas walang police power? Ay nako. First of all, the term police power doesn't refer to the power of police to make arrests. Police power is the power of the state to make rules and laws in accordance with the public interest. Okay? So, second, wala ngang police na mag-execute ng warrant pero magre-rely ang ICC dun sa mga signatories. Yung mga signatory countries. So, kung ang akusado ay pumunta dun sa bansa na signatory to sa Rome Convention, Rome Statute, maaari yung akusado na maaresto doon. Okay? Guys, pakisagot naman yung mga ganitong tanong kasi paulit-ulit na tayo eh. Ang problema kasi dyan, kahit na mahirap nila pagpatunayan na nag-utos na ang Pangulo na patayin ang mga drug addicts, yung mga jury naman na humuhusga sa ICC, hindi po ito jury, panel of judges po. So hindi natin din masasabi sa ngayon kung biased sila. We will have to check on the history of the ICC in order to do that. Hindi yan matutuloy kasi puro galing sa Rappler ang kanilang source. Wala ba silang source na galing mismo sa report ng pulis o ng korte? I'm not sure about that. Or I'm not sure if even meron sila kung pinresinta nila dun sa report. Sabi po ni Sec Panela, walang jurisdiction ng ICC sa Pilipinas. In the first place, di naman naging member ang Pinas kasi di naman na-print sa OG ng Pilipinas. Agdi-disagree ako kay Spox Panelo dito. Yung ating mga local rules or yung mga batas natin does not apply in order to para ipawalang bisa natin yung pagka-signatory natin. Walang pakialam ang ICC dun sa internal rules natin as to when a treaty becomes enforceable within the jurisdiction of the country. Signatory tayo, yun lang ang kailangan nilang tignan. Signatory tayo at the time of the commission of these alleged crimes. Is it possible na i-freeze ang account sa US ng mga kaanak ni PRRD if ever maakusahan si PRRD? Bakit gagawin yon? Because the US is not a signatory to the ICC. Maaari nilang i-ano yon base doon sa sarili na mag-freeze ng mga accounts base sa sarili nilang batas, hindi base doon sa Rome Statute. By the way, hindi pwede yung mga kaanak ha, yun lang akusado. Pag nagpumilit silang pumasok, batuhin. Sabi ni Ma'am Maria, ayaw ngang imbestigahan ng ICC ang China at Uyghur. In spite of the lobbying of the human rights activists, sabi ni Bensouda, hindi part ng ICC ang China where the abuses happened. Tama naman, hindi po sila signatory. So takot ang ICC sa superpowers. Hindi naman po necessarily that should be our conclusion. Simple lang, hindi po sila signatory. Mas hina-highlight pa ng mainstream media yung pag-imbestiga ng ICC kumpara sa pagpapaliwanag na walang jurisdiction dito sa Pinas sa ICC. Well, oo. Di ako malisyoso pero may kinalaman kaya ang Filipino judge ng ICC na dati palang publisher ng Philippine Daily Inquirer, aside from Rappler at Katol, wagas din magkalat ng fake news ang Inquirer. I have no evidence to indicate that he was involved in the recommendation of Fatu Bensouda. Well, ikaw na rin yung nagsabi, malisyoso. Well, let's just take that, let's just note that possibility, pero kung baga sa ebidensya, wala pa akong nakikita na ebidensya sa ganun. Oh yes, merong Filipino judge doon. Pangalanan nyo na, it's former Inquirer publisher Raul Pangalangan, but I have no evidence to indicate that he is involved here. Diba? Another case na naman po ba ng ICC ang utos ni PRRD na patayin ng mga komunista? Wala po akong naririnig na issue na ganyan. Besides, mahihirapan. You're considering that the NPA and the CPP might go to the International Court of Justice and say na pinapapatay sila ng Pangulo. The designation as a terrorist organization will be against them, di ba? Too much suspicious kasi kung kailan outgoing yung si Bensouda, saka naman siya maglalabas ng investigasyon. I agree with that. Oo. Kasi di ba, paalis ka na eh. Tapos on the last day, or on the almost the last day, na paalis ka na, saka ka maglalabas with a statement pa about your request for investigation, something that you can no longer participate in. It's very, how do you call this? Ako, I would use the word interesting. Kasi parang, oo nga, it's something that we should be curious about. Bakit walang ginawa ang ICC sa ginawa ng China with regards to Hong Kong when Great Britain granted them sovereignty? Because China is not a signatory nga to the convention. Although we were saying that sometimes the ICC might consider investigating a state that is not a signatory, unang consideration is whether or not you're a signatory. Okay? Establishment of the court. Tinitignan ko hinahanap ko yung provision na sa yung jurisdiction. Exercise of jurisdiction. Ito. The court has jurisdiction only with respect to the crimes committed after the entry of force of this statute. If a state becomes a part to this statute after its entry into force, the court may exercise its jurisdiction only with respect to crimes committed after the entry into force. Preconditions to the exercise: the state which becomes a party to this statute, sabi sa Article 12, accepts the jurisdiction of the court with respect to crimes referred to in Article 5. The court may exercise its jurisdiction if one or more of the following states are parties to this statute or have accepted the jurisdiction of the court. If the acceptance of a state which is not a party to this statute is required under paragraph 2, that state may by declaration lodge to the registrar accept the exercise of jurisdiction of the court. Okay. Teka, I think we may have to hold in abeyance yung statement ko that they can investigate crimes committed in territories that are not state parties. Hold muna natin yon. Hinahanap ko yung provision na yon na kailangan pwedeng hindi state party. So ulitin ko, the jurisdiction of the ICC is limited to those who are state parties. I saw a provision that allows jurisdiction with yun kasi if the state grants jurisdiction, cedes jurisdiction to the ICC. Okay. The ICC can take cognizance of crimes that are committed even if you're not a state party if later on you agree to the jurisdiction of the ICC. In the case of China, China does not agree to the jurisdiction of the ICC and it is not a state party. Okay. Yan, para mas kumpleto yung sagot. Sabi ni Renato Bagorio, scripted yan, anumang resulta niyan, walang signifikanteng pagbabago ng mga Juan de la Cruz. Okay, that's your opinion. Gaano na ba kadaming bansa ang mga nag-withdraw sa ICC? I don't have the numbers to that. Di ba kumalas na pinasa ICC, bakit iniimbestigahan pa? Because we were signatories at the time, we were a signatory at the time of that the crimes were allegedly committed. Okay. Ito, retired na pala yung nag-request ng full investigation. Bakit binibigyan pa ng oras yan? Di ba napaka-nonsense? Hindi po kasi mawawala yan. Simply because yung tao na dating prosecutor, may bago na pong prosecutor. And for continuity, it is most likely that the new prosecutor will take cognizance of this request. Baka na-bind na nga yung current na prosecutor because this was issued by the office and not by the person. So the person's retirement or end of term is not significant or not very significant. Sabi ni Rose Jean, suspicious dahil malapit na ang halalan. I think mas suspicious yung that the US might be using this as a pressure point for us. That's one theory that I think I can agree with. But remember that this is a theory. Okay? For me, mas mananaig pa rin ang katotohanan. Nothing to worry with ICC. It's politically motivated. Wala kasing magawa, talunin ang Duterte admin. We've been through sa dami ng problemang tumayo pa rin si Duterte. Joey Galpez says, siguro yung nasa complaint sa ICC ay paimbestigahan na ngayon para makita nila na mayroon tayong justice system. Pwede rin hindi mag-submit ang court ng documents tulad ng ginawa ni Uhuru Kenyatta. Hindi nga natin nire-recognize yung jurisdiction, so submitting documents is out of the question. Okay. So, wrap up tayo. Let's look at the two more. Anong pinakaunang mangyayari kung mag-umpisa na sila ng investigation? Pupunta ba sila sa Pilipinas? They will want to, but I doubt if we're going to allow them. Yung mga critics ni PRRD ay sobrang nagbubunyi na at nag-assume na agad na mapaparusahan na si Presidente Duterte ng ICC, di pa nga nag-grant yung request for investigation. Yes, that's what I've been saying. It's early. Tapos may mga defects yung report ni Madam Bensuda. So the panel of judges could take this into consideration, but there is also a precedent that the judges can overlook yung kakulangan ng report. At any rate, it's simply a request to open the investigation. Yung base dun sa evaluation ng Office of the Special Prosecutor. So tama po kayo, Sir Mark. Sobra na silang nagbubunyi. This is simply a request to open an investigation. Kung sakaling may makonvict po sa ICC at preserve po ang warrant, kaninong custody po sa ilalim ang convict? Sa ICC po. May karapatan ba siyang umapila? Yes, may karapatan pong umapila. Mga kapwa Filipino, let's stand together through prayers for the good of our country. Andito po yung pagbabago, wag natin pakawalan, sabi ni Mark DXB. Nakamatayan na ng tatay ko ang problema niya sa anak niya na drug addict. Ngayon nanay ko naman ang numemerwisyo. Ito, sabi ni Rain, magbunyi man mga dilaw, but Duterte will not be punished dahil ICC has no true power, kaya what's the point of celebrating? I wouldn't say that the ICC has no true power. Like I said, they can execute nga warrants through their signatories. So it is important that the government react. So nag-react naman tayo and we're saying we do not recognize the jurisdiction of the ICC dahil hindi nga nila kinikilala na we are dealing with this problem and we are dealing with it. We're the primary actor to deal with our own internal problems. And because of the complementarity provision in the ICC, in the Rome Statute, they have to show na hindi natin ginagawa yon in order for the ICC to jurisdiction to come into play. Pero wag po na natin i-dismiss na walang true power, what's the point, etc., etc. No. We have defenses. And we refuse to recognize them because of several things. Number one, incomplete yung report ni Fatu Bensouda and was based on limited evidence that's even so limited, it might not even warrant the opening of an investigation. Second, they have to, the admissibility was also not addressed by Madam Bensouda. So dun din sa issues of admissibility, sabi, the court shall determine that a case is inadmissible where the case is being investigated or prosecuted by a state which has jurisdiction over it, unless the state is unwilling or unable genuinely to carry out investigation or prosecution. So ito yung case dito sa atin. Hindi pinapakita ni Madam Bensouda sa kanyang report na admissible yung kaso na ito. So this is also an issue that can be raised in investigation or later on at trial. Pero tayo, hindi natin dapat kinikilala na yung may power yung Office of the Special Prosecutor to even request for the opening of an investigation because of both the admissibility and complementarity rules. Sabi ni Andrew Kamasura, si OSG bahala dyan, right? No, we're not even taking cognizance. We're not going to appear. Hindi tayo kasi wala silang jurisdiction sa atin. If we appear there, kung meron tayong ipapadala na representante doon, ibig sabihin kinikilala natin na may jurisdiction yung ICC. Unless we can make a reservation, hindi ko pa nakikita doon sa rules na unlike dito kasi locally, pwede tayong umappear without admitting to jurisdiction if we're just simply going to make a manifestation that the court has no jurisdiction over the person or of the crime. Pero dito sa ICC, I haven't seen a rule that says that we can make such a reservation. So in all likelihood, hindi po tayo magpa-participate dyan. Kasi hindi nga natin kinikilala na may jurisdiction dahil dun sa sarili nilang statute, nakalagay na kailangan unable or unwilling tayo to investigate the case on its own. And we are more than willing, have already done that. Okay. May hawak bang mabigat ang ICC to pursue further investigation and in reality mga karaniwang Pilipino ay may alam ng katotohanan na nararanasan ng Pilipinas? It will depend on the evidence nga that is available. They don't even care whether the government is still standing or doing well. The truth is whatever they think it is. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. Hindi, nagagalaiti ako, sabi ng isa, relax. The number one rule dito sa Luminous, you don't tell me to relax. Second, hindi ako nagagalit ako dun sa paulit-ulit ng mga questions. which I still have to answer anyway because we need to underscore the point. Okay, finally, sabi ni Ellen Lee, sovereign country po ang Pilipinas, hindi kami under the US government, visit sila. I don't think the ICC is making an allegation that we're under the US government. Sa Amerika talamak ang killing spree dyan, kahit bata, as young as 14 years old, mamamatay tao na, sunod-sunod na ang school shooting sprees ng mga batang killer, sarili nilang bansa, hindi nila maayos. I don't think it's that. It's possible that the US could be using this as a pressure point to get us to get back into the VFA. But I don't think that is a concern should be a concern here of the ICC. Mas mabigat ba na basis sa mga resources na nilabas ng biased media versus sa mga legit info ng mga concerned agencies? Where are they getting the confidence? I'm assuming that this is a rhetorical question. Okay, medyo matagal na tayo. So, i-wrap up natin. Let's add to screen. Ayun. This is how it goes, no? Ito yung so natapos tayo doon sa preliminary examinations. And the preliminary examination was conducted by the Office of the Special Prosecutor. At naggawa siya ng report. Doon sa kanyang report, may mga requirements na kailangan i-include. Yung complementarity at saka admissibility evaluations niya. Dito, si Madam Fatou Bensouda, hindi niya in-include yung complementarity rule, hindi niya yung evaluation on complementarity. Kasi ayon dun sa provision on complementarity dito sa Rome Statute, nakalagay na ang jurisdiction ng ICC is complementary only to the rules, the primary jurisdiction of the state to investigate the crimes that were committed within its territory, within its jurisdiction. Yung admissibility rule naman says that hindi, okay, sorry, where's that? The court has to determine if the case is being investigated or prosecuted by a state which has jurisdiction over it, unless the state is unwilling or unable genuinely to carry out the investigation or prosecution. So, later on, that can still be brought up, but Bensouda should have included that in her report. So, maaari natin objectan yung fact na hindi niya in-include yan sa report niya. So, because of these two, which are significant to us, sinasabi natin na walang jurisdiction ng ICC. Kasi nga, nag-imbestiga tayo, we have in fact tried several police officers for killings pursuant to the war on drugs, and there is no state policy. The president has never issued an order for the killings of suspects in the war on drugs. Rather, his statements were limited to the self-defense of the police officers making the arrest or defense of people in the vicinity when the accused has proven to be dangerous or has committed acts showing that he is a danger to the people around him or to the investigating officer. Okay, so what is happening is that the special prosecutor requested to open a formal investigation. Ang sagot naman natin dito sa Pilipinas is we reject the jurisdiction of we do not agree that the ICC has jurisdiction over the case and over the president, considering that in the time that we were a signatory to the convention, when these acts were allegedly committed, we were also taking cognizance of the killings in the war on drugs, ordered investigations, and in fact, some of the police officers are already serving sentence pursuant to those investigations. This takes us out of the jurisdiction of the ICC because we have dealt with these crimes even if we do not even agree that these crimes rise to the level of a crime against humanity. Right? So, maraming salamat sa lahat ng nag-participate dito. Maraming salamat, especially kay Roel Costello at saka dun sa ibang mga nagpadala sa ating super chat and super stickers. Thank you very much for supporting Luminous. Huwag po na like at mag-share dun sa ating Facebook page. And especially, of course, to check if you're still following Luminous kasi nga tinothrottle kami as well as other bloggers. We understand that these are going on and are based on contested allegations of fake news. So, para dun sa mga sinabi natin dito ngayon, with the Rome Statute is available online. You can just Google it. It is available in the ICC website itself. How the court works is also available on the ICC website. You can double check everything that I have said here. And I would like to reiterate that the ICC can investigate crimes. These can investigate only on these four crimes: crimes against humanity, war crimes, crimes of aggression, and ano na nga ba yung isa? Sorry, nakalimutan ko na naman. I keep forgetting. Sorry. Genocide. So, genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. So, itong apat lang ang pwede nilang imbestigahan. And they can investigate only with state parties. However, there is an exception. They can investigate with a person who is not a signatory to the Rome Statute if that state is willing to grant jurisdiction to the ICC. Okay? Clear yan ha, hindi complete kasi yung sinasabi ko earlier on. Yes, that the can take cognizance, the ICC can take cognizance of these crimes if they're committed in states that are not signatory to the ICC on the condition that they submit to the jurisdiction of the ICC. Okay? So, yun yung mga kailangan natin tandaan. Also, dun sa report ni Madam Fatou Bensouda, kulang siya dun sa sa pag-evaluate ng admissibility ng crime na to into the jurisdiction of the court. And two, the complementarity rule, hindi niya in-evaluate that the Philippines had already taken cognizance of the killings in the war on drugs and had investigated the matter. Now, significant ba na yung sinasabing ebidensya ni Madam Fatou Bensouda is primarily hearsay? Well, significant in the sense that it may not be admissible in court as to the guilt or innocence of the accused, pero maaari siyang isumite doon sa panel ng judges to show that an investigation, this is only proof that an investigation should be open. Ngayon pa man, even if it is only being presented as evidence that an investigation should be open, it is still based on hearsay. And para sa atin, dapat ang ebidensya para makapagbukas ng investigasyon ay dapat testimonial, direct testimonial evidence base doon sa mga personal knowledge ng mga witnesses. And so kino-contest natin yung ebidensya na isinusumite din ng Office of the Special Prosecutor. Of course, nakapublish po yung report ng Office of the Special Prosecutor pero merong mga tinatawag tayong redacted provisions, meaning merong mga tinago because possibly of the sensitive nature or to keep the confidentiality of certain witnesses. So, maraming salamat po. Tinitingnan ko lang po. So maraming salamat sa lahat ng nag-participate dito. Maraming salamat din dito kay humabol po si Madam Marilyn Pefianco. Nag-hello lang siya. Maraming salamat po dun sa pagpapadala ninyo sa aming super stickers at sa aming super chat. Don't forget to subscribe din dito sa aming YouTube channel. And if we're going to be setting up a website soon at doon na lang natin ilagay yung nahihirapan kasi yung ibang mga tao to make contributions. So what we'll do is we'll open a PayPal account in the website that we're constructing for Luminous. Maraming salamat po. Don't forget, like, share, follow, and subscribe both sa Facebook at sa YouTube natin. Everybody, you have a good night and we'll see you tomorrow on Karambola. Ay.